Good morning. I am Dr. Nimali Fernando, and I'm a pediatrician in Fredericksburg, and I'm joined today by two of our team members at the Dr. Yum Project, Sarah Moran and Wendy Cannon, and I'll let them introduce themselves in a minute as we get started. But this is our fifth of a series on parenting in the pandemic around food and how to make sure that during this pandemic that we're continuing to raise children who are learning to eat healthy foods. And this isn't always easy, but of course in a pandemic there are additional challenges. So we're excited to be able to offer this series to you. Many of you may have joined before, many of you may be joining for the first time. So we'll start with a few kind of introductions to our work, and then today we're going to be talking about parenting patiently. I first want to thank the Abu Dhabi Childhood Authority for helping to make this program a reality for these 6 sessions. So we thank you for their support. I'm going to start by saying parenting patiently may seem easy, but in a pandemic especially, we sometimes are at a loss for patience. So we're going to give you some strategies today so you can keep your cool and stay calm as you're trying to help your children learn to eat. All right. Oh, I'm sorry there. Let me get back. So just to give you an idea, our nonprofit organization is called the Dr. Yum Project. We're located in Fredericksburg, Virginia, which is 50 miles south of DC. And we help families and communities overcome barriers to eating well. And of course, the big barrier now is the pandemic and the way that it's changed our lives and the way we're able to find food and cook together, the change in our schedules. There's so many challenges and barriers now that we're facing. So we have been hard at work developing new tools and ideas and inspiration on how to continue to offer great meals to your family in easy, delicious, budget-friendly ways. One of our big programs in the US and beyond is the Dr. Yum Preschool Food Adventure, which is a curriculum that helps children learn how to eat food in a fun and sensory-based way, a very inclusive, joyful way. And we do that within early childhood centers across the US and beyond. And we have been doing this for about 6 years, and we've really amassed a big experience on what really works when trying to teach kids how to be good eaters. And so some of that we're going to be sharing with you today. The original program that we started in 2013 was really an effort by myself and my good friend, Coach Mel. Coach Mel is a feeding specialist. She actually is a speech language pathologist who specializes in feeding challenges in children. Some of those children may be typically developing. Some of those children may have special needs that present feeding challenges. But we both saw how many children were struggling with feeding, and we wanted to create a program that allowed children of a diverse range of abilities to enjoy food and to learn how to become better eaters, and to show their teachers how to take them on that journey in the classroom, but also to educate parents on how to continue that journey at home. We also wrote Raising a Healthy, Happy Eater, which is a book on feeding development. So feeding is actually just one facet, but it's an important facet of a child's overall development. And so we wrote Raising a Healthy, Happy Eater to introduce parents to the idea that they can really help their child's feeding development with some proactive strategies and some good parenting strategies. So throughout this series, we've been talking about different parenting strategies. These are the 7 parenting strategies that are woven throughout our book, but today we're going to focus on one, which is parenting patiently. So parenting patiently is hard because it involves waiting, but waiting really is the magic parenting technique. And it's really our job as parents to show children the way and not drag them along with us, but really pave the way and let their development unfold. Now, I think we all can recognize that children are different. And maybe if you have more than one child in your family, you may have noticed that one child learned walking or motor skills faster than another child who may have learned speech much faster. So everybody's timetable is a little bit different, and feeding is absolutely the same. There are going to be children that learn to eat a variety of foods very quickly and very easily, and then other children may take more time. And that's really where the patience comes in, to recognize that there are different timetables that children have. But if you exercise patience, even those children who take longer will eventually get there. We just need to take a deep breath and let that feeding development unfold and help them in key spots along the way. All right, so as I said, I am here with Wendy Cannon, who is our preschool curriculum coordinator and outreach specialist, and Sarah Moran, who is our registered dietitian. And they're going to be talking about tasting. So this is really important. When we're exercising patience and trying to help children learn to eat new foods, they have got to taste foods eventually. Now, some children aren't going to be ready to taste right away. There are children who may have particular feeding challenges. They may have particular developmental challenges. For those kids, feeding might be a little bit more anxiety provoking. It may be just a little bit harder for them. And so for those kids, tasting can actually involve their other senses. So maybe before one of those more challenging children is able to taste with their mouth, they're going to experience food by smelling it, or by looking at it and describing it, or by touching it. But eventually we want kids to start tasting food. And for most kids, it isn't too challenging, but we want to be encouraging, and we want them to enjoy tasting and have it be really an exploration. And we want it to be fun and not something that we're forcing them to do. So Wendy and Sarah are going to be talking about some tips for tasting at home. So I'm going to turn it over to them and take it away, ladies.
Hey everybody. So I'm Sarah.
I'm Wendy.
And this is going to be fun. We're excited to talk to you about this today. And there's, I think, a lot of really great tips that we're going to be able to share with you. Some really practical things that you can do to make tasting easier.
Okay, so I'm a preschool teacher, and one of the things we really like to stress to our parents when we're talking about tasting is that you want to have small bites. So sometimes food can be overwhelming. A lot of foods are in a shape that's hard to navigate within the mouth for new eaters. And so just as Dr. Fernando talked about feeding being a developmental skill, also all of those other skills that they're learning, fine motor skills and all of the things, reading and cognitive development, all of those things play into it. And so what we can do as the grown-ups in their lives is offer manageable bites. So I'm going to show you, I'll have Sarah maybe hold this up closer to the camera. This is just some frozen veg. And probably you all have used this to throw into a soup or something. And you can see that this carrot piece is just a little cube. It's just a very small, manageable cube. It's a lot different than handing a child a big carrot or a piece of carrot, which might be hard to navigate in their mouth when they're a new eater. So that's kind of the size and shape we're looking for. So it has some definition, some edges, something that they can really bite into. So instead of, this piece of orange might be hard for a child to navigate, because they're gonna, if they put this whole thing in their mouth, then there's the skin on it and there's some of these stringy things, and it may feel weird. There's a different texture to the outside and then a different feeling on the inside. So if you can make it a more manageable piece, Sarah, maybe you can cut that into a tasting piece. You'll see that it will make it easier for the child to navigate that bite. So if this is a new food, if you make it into a piece like that, whoops, like that, then it's similar to that size of the carrot. So along the same thing, if we had, let's say you had some cucumber slices on your serving for today, and the child would have to navigate biting through the skin, and then this inner part has a different texture. So let's make that into a tasting piece. And then it makes it a little easier to put into the mouth and to navigate by making that little cube piece.
And those edges are really important, because you don't realize when you're eating how much complex work you're doing with your tongue and your lips and moving the food around your mouth. And having those edges really helps the child be able to feel where the edge of that food is, and gives them that more defined shape to work with.
Yeah, I think a lot of times we forget that foods are all foods are new to kids, and you know, we've had years and years to get used to different foods, how they look, how they smell, how they feel, and how they feel in your mouth. So for instance, this one, the cherry tomato, or the little small tomatoes, these are ones that have never been felt comfortable in my mouth. I would not put this in my mouth and bite into it like I would a grape, because it's uncomfortable, the inside, the texture, the feeling of the seeds and all that. So for me, I do this as an adult, and I make them, when they go into my salad, into these small pieces, and that's manageable and comfortable for me. So not only do kids need to feel comfortable eating, grown-ups do too. So, and it's nice when you can share with kids a personal experience of something that works for you might work for them.
So once you've got your food in these shapes, let's talk about the actual tasting part. So like I was mentioning earlier, there's a lot of complex work going on when you're chewing to bring all the food together into one piece and move it around your mouth to the right spot, to know how much pressure you need to use to chew that food, because some foods are very soft, some foods are very crunchy, and that's all stuff we have to learn. So when we're helping kids to take a tasting bite, there's a few things.
Yeah, I was going to say, have you had parents show concern to you about their kids, like when they put something in their mouth, they gag and spit it out immediately?
Yes, yes. And a lot of times people read that as, oh, the child doesn't like the food, and then the food isn't offered again, and then we get down this path that we've discussed in some of the previous sessions, where you can end up in a place where the child only has a few foods they like, and we don't want to be taking foods off the list.
We want to be
adding foods.
So what happens on the front of the tongue? Let's say I take this piece of orange, for instance.
Right.
What happens if I put it on the front of my tongue?
So a lot of times what happens is, one, kids will do this like this weak tooth bite with the front of their teeth, like, but also they will puff it out. They'll push it out with their tongue.
The tongue
thrusts.
It's a reflex,
It goes,
right?
And then the food's out, and then it's not in the mouth. So we want to combat the kind of like weak chewing and like the touch my tongue and now I'm done.
I did it.
Eating.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what we want to do is put the piece of food on the molars, these big broad teeth in the back of the mouth. So we instruct the child to take the food and put it on their dinosaur teeth, is what we call it. It's very fun. Kids love dinosaurs generally. So you can tell them to take the food. Wendy can demo while I talk.
I'm going to put it right back in my dinosaur teeth, Sarah. Okay, I'm going to put it back here. All right, what do I do now? It's on my dinosaur teeth.
Crunch and munch. And you can do this too to cue them. Hit on the table. Crunch, crunch, crunch.
Then what am I going to do?
So the next thing is to keep water nearby. So you can hose down that bite with some water. So this whole process, what's happening? The child is putting the food on these teeth that can actually chew the food, which is what you do as a grown-up. You move the food around to those back teeth. You just don't even realize you're doing it. So we're telling them to do that so they can get a good taste. and they can chew it confidently. And then the water helps to wash the food down. So if the flavor's a little strong for them, they can wash it down, but it also helps them to swallow, which is really important.
This is a Coach Mel tip, and she's our feeding specialist, and she is just so great at explaining how important the dinosaur teeth, the crunch, to feel that sensory feeling of pressing your teeth down and chewing the food. But then I want all of you to try this at home with whatever drink you have in front of you. Start to reach for it. I'm going to have mine out here. Start to reach for it. As soon as you start reaching, I swallow, because I'm anticipating drinking this drink and I've got to clear my mouth. So as soon as your child begins to hold a drink, they're already swallowing. That reflex is just natural, and you'll see yourself doing it. You'll remember now when you're at a restaurant, every time you're getting ready to reach for your drink, you're automatically swallowing what's in your mouth and readying your mouth to clear it out with your drink.
Right. So what we're doing is we're setting up the structure and these different cues, from the shape of the food to where to place it, to have the water, to help kids learn these steps they need to take to eat, and it helps them to have a successful taste and avoid some of the issues that can come up along the way.
Everything just being pushed out and then not having that successful taste. Okay.
I wanted to just jump in really quick too, and just
jump right in there.
Remind our viewers that we're going through a lot of great information today, and you may have questions along the way.
Oh, so thank you.
Feel free to type those questions in as you're thinking of them, and that will allow our team to leave enough time at the end to answer those questions. So as you're thinking about them, use that chat, type that in, and then we can maybe even answer some of those questions along the way too.
Thank you.
Yes, definitely leave your questions for us. So another thing to think about is the words we use. So this is a topic we covered a little bit in a previous session if you were here, but if not, we're going to cover it a little bit for this, because the words we use when we're talking about tasting foods, they're important. We want to create an environment where tasting and trying new foods is fun and exciting
and new.
Yeah.
An experience that is enjoyable.
Right. So
not forced.
Right. We want it to be fun, because food is fun. So you can talk, when we're talking about tasting and these different little bites we're doing, you can call them things like exploring bites or adventure bites or practicing bites. And I really like practicing, because that emphasizes that you have to practice so your taste buds can get used to the food, and so that you can learn to like the food. So just thinking about how you're talking about it, it's something that can seem small, but it really sets the tone for the whole experience and can make it something that's really fun or something that's not so fun. And if it's fun, then we're also going to have more success in helping kids develop those eating skills and learning how to try new foods.
Yeah, and I can share a little personal experience. Yesterday, this fruit right here is called a pluot, which is a cross between a plum and an apricot. And I took one of these to, we were working with some preschoolers yesterday, and he had never had a pluot. And so we talked about how it looked on the outside and this beautiful color on the inside, and how the skin is kind of smooth, but also a little tough, and the inside was soft. And so then I got these into some pieces for him to cut with his knife. And so once they were flat, and he could make those tasting bite sizes himself, and then he was able to taste these little pluot bites, and actually he found a new fruit that he liked. But it really does take that really gentle and careful and happy introduction of foods to talk about, well, what is this thing? Oh, you've had a plum before. Well, this is part of a plum. You've never had an apricot? Well, let's talk about apricots. Mm-hmm. And it really opens the door for an adventure, an experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, and in keeping with that, maybe you...
Sure. So, another thing to think about is, when are we doing tasting? So we talked about how to do it, but the timing is also important. It's really helpful to have these tasting times away from mealtime. So we want to be doing this in between meals, maybe when we're preparing food, maybe if
You're setting up your snack plate.
Right, getting things together,
or making
maybe
a recipe.
you know, come home from the grocery store, we can do, let's try this new thing we got and do a little
Mm.
tasting. But we want it to be outside of the mealtime because that helps to create the fun environment for the kid and for you. So these tastes aren't about getting them good nutrition or making sure that they have what their body needs, which is what's happening at mealtime. We're, you know, eating the food that's gonna keep us going. It's just a taste. So it takes the pressure off for the kid, but it also takes the pressure off for you as the grown-up, feeling like what happens if they don't eat it, because it's just about tasting and exploring. And so the meal times can still be about family connection and enjoying food together. And then this tasting thing is kind of a separate thing we do that's fun, but it's not the food we're eating to get the energy and the nutrients that we need.
It's more like a learning time, and that's, you know, when we're able to do the preschool food adventure in school, we are doing the chopping, the work of preparing the food. We're doing the chopping and setting up our tasting mat very separate from the time when we actually introduce the recipe and the snack to the children during the snack time. And so they're able to, while they're working with the food, they're able to get that sensory input from how it feels and how it smells and how it looks, and they get used to all of these feelings and sensory input. And then it really does make the taste more possible during the food time.
And it's very natural to do that during food prep. So that's a great time to just naturally bring it in. Another thing to think about too is the variety of foods that you're offering. So this was a concept that was covered in the last session, but we want to make sure everyone's on the same page, and to also review for those of you who maybe were here, we want to be thinking about offering a variety of foods. And that is important for good nutrition, but it's also important to give your child some options to choose from so they don't just have this one thing. And if they're a little nervous about it, then it can become really pressured and uncomfortable. So Nimali, if you have that graphic and you want to throw it up of the different parts of the meal
or snack,
then we can talk about it. But there are 4 main parts of any meal or snack, and you'll see them come up here in a moment. And these are not things to think about like, my kid needs to eat all these parts. It's for you as you're planning and preparing and deciding what's going to be a part of the meal, to think about these 4 different parts and making sure you're having something from each category. So first one is carbohydrates. There are some examples here. I won't read them all to you, but you should be able to see on the screen. Those are going to be your grains, your fruits, starchy vegetables like corn and peas and potatoes. Then the protein section is going to be any sort of meats or fish, as well as beans, lentils, tofu,
eggs.
Mm-hmm. Nuts and seeds are also a source of protein, nut butters. Then we have fiber in the green block, and that's mostly going to be your fruits and vegetables, but also some of our whole grains, as well as the beans and lentils. Again, they also have fiber. And then fat is going to be from any oils or cooking fats you're using, but fat is also just a part of a lot of the foods we eat. So like our nuts and seeds, the different meats and eggs and cheeses and things like that, those all have fat kind of in there in the mix. So when you have these 4 parts in a meal or snack, it gives you a variety of flavors and textures, but also a variety of nutrients. And it helps you to feel satisfied, and also just makes the meal more interesting because you've got a few different things going on there. So when you're thinking about what you want to offer at the meal, you want to think about these categories. So we're going to have a lot of variety and then smaller portions. So we have a plate here that we can kind of show you an example of what this might look like. So I'll try to hold this up to the camera, and hopefully you guys will be able to see without the stuff falling.
Here, I'll hold you.
Okay. Talk. So there are a few different things on this plate right now. We have some corn down here. We have some potatoes. There's some turkey, a snap pea, and then some green beans. And you can see these are cut into those small bites that kids can have. and that are good for them for tasting and chewing. But we also have the different categories of carbs, proteins, fiber, and fat.
Because this, or pile of even 2 or 3 of these on the plate, could seem a little overwhelming and hard to navigate in the mouth. This is just one of those cut into those pieces. And this would be really all your child needs to practice. The same with the green beans. This is a pile of these is hard to navigate in the mouth for kids. So they're just cut into a manner. This is only 2 green beans. So one thing we like to remind parents, this is half of a potato that's about this big. So just reminding parents that a lot of times we're putting too much food on children's plates and they're feeling overwhelmed. And it's always great for them to eat something and ask for an additional helping than for them to look at the pile of something and feel
like,
too overwhelmed to even start it, you know? So,
because kids need a lot less food than adults would estimate, generally speaking. That often happens where we think, oh, they need a lot, but you know, they're little people, so they don't always need that much. And also they're really good at knowing how hungry or full they are. And there's also so many factors in terms of when was the last time they ate, how much did they eat, what have they been doing in between, have they been sitting or have they been running around? So really letting them dictate the amounts, and you're just offering, you know, that variety. And also another thing to remember is, you know, this example we showed you was a meal with all the separate parts, but you may have a meal that's more mixed,
like a stir fry on some brown rice,
right? Or a soup or a stew, or there's a lot of meals where all the components are mixed together in one dish, and that's great too. So it doesn't have to be separate like that, but you still want to offer some options. So you wouldn't just have one.
You might have the stir fry with
Yeah.
veggies and chicken on brown rice, but you also might have then some slices of cucumber or orange to just make sure you're offering
A couple things to pick from.
Yeah. And so that's part of just knowing like that you want to offer a preferred food, a sometimes preferred food, one that they're still practicing, and then maybe a new food you introduce, but have all of those things available in the meal. I just wanted to bring out, before we send this over back to Dr. Fernando to talk about some teeth health, just want to show you that there are lots of straw options for children. And we really want to get children using straws versus like a sippy cup or something like that, because the straw and the sucking is what's going to strengthen that oral. So you could have one of these type of cups where the straw flips up, and you want to have water. Obviously, you want to have water in it. And then like this is a silicone straw, and it's comfortable for me. I don't like the metal straws as much because they get very cold and they're kind of hard on my teeth. I don't like it. So I prefer these, but you want to just be able to offer things. Now you can see this is way too tall for this cup.
And especially if you're a little person, think
right?
about like
This
a 4-year-old.
Managing this is like, so you don't want to do that. If you have some of these little straws, this is interesting to try because it's got a very tiny hole to suck through. You could do one of these little stir type straws, or you could just take a traditional straw, but then cut it to the size you need so that it's not overwhelming and it's not going to tip. And then you have it here, you have the little tilt on it. I cut it a little too short, but you get the idea. Cut it to the size you need.
And then it's going to be it's going to be in a comfortable position for your child. And also they're learning how to use an open cup, which is also an important skill, is learning how to hold the open cup and not stuff slosh everywhere.
Yeah. Okay, so this is a reminder from our last session about having a schedule. And this is super important, especially now that we're spending much more time at home and we're preparing much more of our meals at home. Maybe we're schooling at home. You want to make sure you have a set schedule, because if everybody's working and doing school from home, sometimes it turns into a free-for-all in the kitchen, and people are in the pantry and the fridge and eating basically all day long. And we really want to make sure that you define for your family. You all work it out together and set it up so that everybody knows what's happening. But you want to talk about feeding times and growing times. And during the growing times, we're learning, we're doing the school, we're running around outside, we're playing, we're doing other things, but we're not eating. We're only going to eat during the feeding times. So you can see a sample schedule that we have up here for the slide. that you would have a morning feeding time, and then you'll spend a couple hours growing. So this may be school, this may be going out to the playground, this might be working in the garden, things like that. And then you're going to need to come in and have a snack, which is another eating time. And then you'll continue to have a growing time, and then have your lunch. And if you watched last time, if you are able to watch the replay, go back and watch that, because we talked about how really being prepared in your fridge with those snacks and lunches already cut, prepared, and ready to grab, then you're able to just get what you need for the feeding time, eat it, clean it up, and then have another growing time, a learning time. And then you'll have a snack and then dinner. So, and then you stop.
Kitchen closed. Kitchen
Right.
closed.
Kitchen closed.
And these defined times also is important to remember, like kids might not eat at all of these, or they may not eat a lot, but it's an opportunity for them to eat. You're offering the food, and then they may eat a lot at one of these times. They may not eat quite as much at another time, but you're giving that structure of when we're eating and when we're not.
And that's okay, right? If they don't, if kids are a lot better at regulating, and this schedule will help them to learn hunger cues,
yes,
to learn what it feels like to be hungry, to be more receptive to what is offered at the feeding time, because as Dr. Yum says, hunger is the best sauce.
Right. You're not going to want to eat food if you're not hungry for it. And so this also helps them to learn too that, like, if I don't eat right now, there will be some time before I have a chance to eat again. And so that helps them to learn, okay, how much do I need? Do I want to turn this food down when I know that, you know, I'm not going to get to eat until the next meal or snack?
Yeah. So, so this is a great time to turn it back to Dr. Fernando, who is going to talk about how important all of these things are in relation to oral health.
Thank you for those awesome tips. And I love that last tip about feeding times and growing times. It does help so much with keeping a schedule which fosters hunger, which fosters more willingness to try. But it's also really good for your teeth to have a feeding schedule too. So some of these good habits will help to foster good oral health, and having good oral health means that your child can more comfortably explore food. So these things kind of feed on each other. You have to have a healthy, happy, comfortable mouth in order to have an adventurous eater. So we're going to talk about how important it is to take care of your child's oral health, and I'm going to give you some tips on how to do that. I think a lot of folks don't realize how important it is to have a healthy mouth and how that impacts your overall health. And when we take care of our children's primary teeth, it can also impact the health of their secondary teeth as well. So even though they're going to lose those little baby teeth, we want to take the best care that we can of them. So back to the feeding schedule, it is important for our teeth that we take breaks from eating. And I'll explain why. So when teeth erupt, the enamel is very soft, much softer than the adult enamel, which is the protective coating on the teeth. And the teeth are always trying to repair and restore that enamel. And when we eat, it creates an acidic environment in our mouth. The pH in our mouth will decrease, and that promotes the enamel from breaking down and demineralizing. And when we then finish eating, the pH will go back to a normal state, and then we remineralize or restore our teeth. So if we are eating all the time, then that pH remains low, and we may not have that time to remineralize and restore that enamel. And because the enamel is so soft in babies and in children, it's very easy to erode that enamel, and that can lead to tooth decay. So taking a break from eating really lets their teeth reharden and makes it harder for them to get tooth decay. So I'm showing you here a picture of a child with a bottle. Of course, in the first few months of life, children don't have teeth, most of them, and they're eating pretty frequently. But as they start to have their primary teeth erupt, their feeding schedule may allow for those breaks in eating. And then by the age of 1, we really want to wean them from the bottle. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, but that's really important. When children are taking a bottle, they're having this constant drip of that acid on their teeth, and it doesn't allow for the teeth to restore and repair. So that's tip number 1. The second tip is to drink water. And I actually did a lecture for a group of dentists, and I did some research for that lecture on nutrition for dental health, and found that if you take a human tooth and you put it in a glass of orange juice, in 30 minutes, 60% of the enamel is eroded. And that's in an adult tooth. So you can see how that acid can make the teeth even softer and more at risk for tooth decay. So I generally recommend only 2 drinks at home that children should be drinking at home, and that's milk and water. And I really believe that teaching children to drink water is one of the best habits that you can teach them. Now, that doesn't mean that they can't ever have juice. Juice can be a nice, sometimes beverage that can be enjoyed outside of the home. But even our own American Academy of Pediatrics came out with a recommendation a few years ago that children under the age of 1 should not drink juice unless it's in special circumstances where juice may be used more as a medicine. But generally, children under 1, because of that soft enamel of their new teeth, really should not drink juice. And then they also recommended a limited amount of juice for older children over the age of 12 months. So we talked about this in an earlier session. My recommendation in general, because juice is so sugary and kids really do enjoy it, even adults, we enjoy it, we recommend not having juice in the home as a regular beverage, because it can be hard to limit it to that small quantity, and instead to have water available. And we have an example here of how you can make water a little bit more interesting or exciting. On special days, you can find some fruit or mint or other herbs and put that in your fruit, in your water, and steep it almost like you would steep tea. And kids can enjoy the flavor of the fruit without all the sugar and all the acid. Okay, my next tip is to brush twice a day with fluoride toothpaste. And this is important. Our American Academy of Pediatrics and American Academy of Pediatric Dentistry recommends using fluoride toothpaste at the first tooth eruption. So even if your baby is 6 months old and they're getting their first baby teeth, you should use fluoride toothpaste. The reason is that the fluoride actually helps that remineralization, rehardening process. So a lot of parents, they ask me, well, what if the baby swallows the fluoride? So we recommend using a rice grain size amount for new babies. And then for toddlers, you can use more like a pea size amount of fluoride toothpaste. And then I also recommend to kind of press it into the bristles of the toothbrush. And that way the fluoride toothpaste is foaming on the teeth, but the child isn't swallowing very much of it. And even just a minimal amount of swallowing of fluoride toothpaste isn't harmful to the baby. So, so that needs to happen at first tooth eruption and twice a day. And the timing of that nighttime brushing is also really important. Once a baby has their first tooth eruption, really the last thing in their mouth at night should be a toothbrush. So that means if they're doing any bottle or breastfeeding, after that feeding is when you want to brush the teeth. Because if you're brushing the teeth and then you are feeding the baby, you're decreasing that pH again, and the tooth is at risk for softening overnight. And then ideally, babies need to, shouldn't do a lot of eating or any eating through the night so that fluoride can stay on the teeth and they can continue to reharden their teeth. This is also really important. Our American Academy of Pediatrics and Pediatric Dentistry, they both recommend that we have our first dental visit at age 1. And here in the US, we have a fair amount of pediatric dentists that are very comfortable seeing babies at the age of 1. And there are a fair amount of family dentists too that are comfortable with babies and seeing them for their first visits. If you wait until 3 or 4, babies could, and toddlers and preschoolers could already have damage to their teeth. So we like those early visits so that we can establish good habits and recognize problems early and get kids on the right path. And then lastly, we want to make sure that we are introducing foods that are healthy and whole without a lot of added sugar. And in general, that is a very good idea for the teeth. Sugar is one of those things that can decrease the pH and make those teeth very vulnerable. Hard candies, gummy snacks, and even gummy vitamins. I have a lot of conversations in my practice about vitamins, and what's become very popular is gummy vitamins and gummy supplements. And those can be sweetened, and they also stick in the teeth. So kids who take gummy supplements on average have a higher risk of tooth decay. So we recommend, if you're going to do a vitamin supplement, to use something that's a hard chewable style vitamin rather than a gummy vitamin. And then back to the bottles. We talked a lot about straws today. And one of the things that I really encourage in my practice is for kids to get off of the bottle, and at around 9 months, in anticipation of getting rid of that bottle, to help them learn how to drink from a straw. And the reason we love straws so much, we love straws for lots of reasons. Coach Mel has introduced us to the wonders of straws. And straw cups are really good because they work the mouth. So as kids are sucking from a straw, they are strengthening these muscles that are important for chewing and swallowing, and also for speaking. So I have had kids with speech delays that, because they're using the straw cup so frequently, they really progress quite quickly through speech therapy because they have these muscles that they're strengthening along the way. So in my book, there is kind of a tutorial on how to introduce a straw cup at 9 months using a puree. So you can actually suck a little bit of a fruit puree into the end of a straw and present that straw to a baby. And you'll actually even put a little bit of that puree on the outside of the straw. And as they start to recognize that there's something yummy around that straw, they're going to try to get what's in that straw too. And you may start to notice that they will try to suck what's in the straw. And that's a great introduction to how to actually suck from a straw. And I have a lot of babies that come in at around 9 to 12 months with their straw cups of water. And so we like babies to get a little bit of a taste of water at 6 months, but to really then start to use a straw cup regularly at around 9 months, so that at 12 months, we can discontinue the bottle. The other thing about cup drinking in general is that we want to make sure that our children aren't walking around with a cup. So this is really important from an injury standpoint. We see a fair amount, a few thousand mouth injuries from cups and also from pacifiers. So babies, when they first learn to walk, they're not particularly balanced. They're not particularly aware of their environment, and they fall down a lot. And so if a child has a cup in their mouth or a pacifier in their mouth and they fall down, they can injure their lips and they can injure their teeth. So in general, my guidance on cups is that they should really be only drinking when they're seated at the table or supervised. And if they're walking around, they should put their cup down. And then my advice on pacifiers is that after a child starts to really walk and crawl and explore their environment, that pacifier should stay in the crib so that the child isn't at risk for falling with the pacifier in the mouth. And we often will use a pacifier for comfort at nighttime, but you can also use it for comfort in a car, in the car seat, so they're not going to fall from their car seat. So that would be another place that they can use their pacifier. But when they're at home playing, the pacifier should be kept out of reach. And then the final weaning of the pacifier should also happen between 18 and 24 months. And the reason for that is that the pacifier can mold the palate. And as long as the child is young, that molding is flexible. And so if you wean that pacifier by 18 to 24 months, most of that molding is going to reshape and remold. But the longer that child uses the pacifier, the more that the palate and even the incisors, those front teeth, can be misshapen and probably could necessitate even needing orthodontic work later on. So I tell parents to try to get that pacifier out of their bedtime routine and daytime routine by the age of 18 to 24 months. So those are my guidelines. Did I miss anything, ladies?
I think that's it. We have
just a few minutes for questions, if any came in. I also grabbed, just for a visual, I grabbed a juice box this is 4.23 ounces. So this is actually more than the recommended amount of juice for a whole day. Yeah. And my kids at preschool would suck through this in like 2 seconds and want another one. So, so at preschool, we only have water as our beverage for snack. And honestly, a lot of times children are confused about hunger and thirst. And as soon as they sit down at the snack table, they're famished. And if they do have that little cup of juice, it will go down in a second. So it's nice to have the cup of water, because that's what they will drink, and then they'll realize that they were thirsty and they needed some water. Whereas if they suck down the juice, then they're also affecting how hungry they are to actually eat the real food.
So yeah, absolutely. And we have 3 little questions. I think I can answer those pretty quickly.
Okay, great. Go for it.
So someone asked about the 2.5 hours of the food schedule. That 2 to 2.5 hours means that we're not eating. We're taking a break and we're working on developmental skills. We're playing, we're enjoying other things, and we're growing. And so that is just designating a break where children are not eating. And then someone asked about toothbrushing twice a day. So we recommend last thing at night after all feeding has happened, including milk, and then first thing in the morning, we brush again. And then someone asked about her 3-year-old has never visited a dentist because she's afraid. So yes, bring them to the dentist. A pediatric dentist, just like a pediatrician, is very comfortable managing babies and young patients who are scared of the doctor or the dentist. And once your child starts going to the dentist, then it becomes more routine and they'll get used to it. But even if the teeth look healthy, it's a good idea to establish that habit.
Yeah.
So I think we're about out of time. So thank you everybody for joining us, and we hope to see you next week.
Yeah, if there are more questions, we can answer into the chat.
Bye everyone.
Bye.